I will never forget the Christmas dinner when my own family made me eat alone in the kitchen. While they laughed and celebrated in the dining room, I sat on a wooden stool near the stove, eating from a chipped plate that nobody else wanted to use. I could hear their voices through the door. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the sound of joy, but I was not part of it. That night, something inside me changed. I did not cry. I did not beg for their attention. I simply made a decision. Sometimes the quietest revenge is the most powerful. My name is Eleanor, and this is my story. I am 72 years old. For 50 years, I was a devoted wife and mother. My husband Robert and I raised 3 children together. Michael is my eldest son. He is 45 now and works as a banker. Then there is my daughter Lisa, who is 42 and married to a man named Greg. My youngest is Peter, who is 38. I gave my whole life to them. I cooked every meal. I cleaned every corner of our home. I stayed awake on sleepless nights when they were sick. I worked 2 jobs when Robert lost his position at the factory. I did everything a mother could do. Robert passed away 5 years ago. After his death, I felt lost. The house became too quiet. The children were busy with their own lives. Michael lived 2 hours away with his wife Amanda and their 2 teenage kids. Lisa lived in the same town but rarely visited. Peter moved to another state for work. I understood. They had their own families, their own responsibilities, but I was alone. The silence in my home was heavy. I started calling them more often. I wanted to hear their voices. I needed to feel like I still mattered. When Christmas was approaching, I felt hopeful. I called Michael and suggested we have Christmas dinner at my house, like we used to. He hesitated. He said Amanda wanted to host this year. I felt a little disappointed, but I said that was fine. Then he said I was invited, of course. I felt relief. At least I would be with my family. At least I would not be alone on Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I prepared gifts for everyone. I bought toys for my grandchildren. I found a beautiful scarf for Amanda. I got a wallet for Michael. I spent hours wrapping everything perfectly. I baked my famous apple pie because I knew everyone loved it. I arrived at Michael's house with my arms full of gifts and hope in my heart. Amanda opened the door. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said hello and let me in. The house was beautifully decorated. There was a huge Christmas tree covered in lights. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air. My grandchildren ran past me without saying hello. I called out to them, but they did not stop. I walked into the living room and saw everyone gathered there. Lisa and Greg were on the couch. Peter had flown in and was laughing at something on his phone. Michael was pouring drinks. I said Merry Christmas to everyone. They looked up. They said Merry Christmas back, but their voices were flat. I tried to ignore the strange feeling in my chest. I handed out the gifts I brought. Amanda took them without much interest and placed them under the tree. Nobody opened them. I asked if I could help in the kitchen. Amanda said everything was under control. I sat down in the corner and waited. Dinner time came. Everyone moved toward the dining room. The table was set beautifully. There were candles and fine china and platters of food. I stood up to follow them, but Amanda gently touched my arm. She said, "Mom, we have a small problem. The dining table only seats 8 people comfortably, and with everyone here it is a bit crowded." She said it would be better if I ate in the kitchen. Just this once. She said it so sweetly, so politely, like it was a small favor. I stood there, frozen. I looked at Michael. He avoided my eyes. I looked at Lisa. She looked down at her plate. Peter was already sitting at the table talking to Greg. Nobody said anything. Nobody defended me. Amanda handed me a plate, not the fine china, a regular plate. She said she would bring me food in a minute. I took the plate. I walked into the kitchen. I sat on the stool near the counter. Amanda brought me food, a small portion of turkey, some mashed potatoes, no gravy, no stuffing. She set it down and walked away. I heard the dining room door close. Then I heard laughter. I heard the sound of glasses clinking. I heard my grandchildren giggling. I heard my own children enjoying Christmas while I sat alone in the kitchen. I looked down at my plate. The food blurred. Tears filled my eyes, but I did not let them fall. I thought about all the Christmases I had hosted. I thought about the years I spent cooking and decorating and making everything perfect for them. I thought about the times I went without so they could have more. And now, I was not even good enough to sit at the table. I ate slowly. I did not taste anything. When I finished, I washed my plate. I dried it. I put it away. Then I walked into the living room. I picked up my coat. Michael noticed. He asked if I was leaving already. I smiled. I said yes, I am a little tired. He said okay, and turned back to his conversation. Nobody else said goodbye. I walked out into the cold December night. I drove home in silence. When I reached my house, I sat in the car for a long time. I felt something shift inside me. I was done being invisible. I was done being taken for granted. I decided that if my family did not value me, then I would show them what life was like without me. Asterisk. The next morning, I made a phone call. I called my lawyer, Jonathan. He had been Robert's lawyer for years, and he had helped me manage everything after Robert passed. I told him what happened. I told him how my daughters were treating me, and I told him I wanted to make some changes. Big changes. Jonathan listened carefully. Then he said, "Catherine, are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back." I said, "I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Over the next few weeks, I worked with Jonathan to put everything in order. You see, what my daughters didn't know was that I owned everything. The house they were living in, the properties we had invested in, the business Robert and I had built. Everything was in my name. When Robert died, he left everything to me. He trusted me to take care of it. And I had. But my daughters assumed that one day, it would all be theirs. They assumed I would just hand it over without question. They were wrong. I decided to sell the house. My house. The one Emily and David were living in. Jonathan handled everything. We listed it quietly. We found a buyer quickly. It was a beautiful property. After all, the sale was finalized in less than a month. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't tell Rachel. I waited. I wanted them to understand what they had done. I wanted them to feel what I felt. On a cold January morning, Jonathan and I drove to the house. Emily answered the door. She looked surprised to see me with a man in a suit. She said, "Mom, what's going on? Who is this?" I said, "This is Jonathan. He's my lawyer. We need to talk." We walked inside. David came down the stairs. Rachel and her husband were visiting, and they were in the living room. Everyone gathered around, confused. Jonathan opened his briefcase and pulled out some papers. He said, "I'm here to inform you that this property has been sold. The new owners will be taking possession in 30 days. You have until then to vacate the premises." Emily's face went white. She said, "What? What are you talking about? This is our house." I looked at her and I said, "No, Emily. This was never your house. This is my house. And I sold it." David stood up, angry. He said, "You can't do this. We have a family. We have children. Where are we supposed to go?" I said, "You'll figure it out. Just like I had to figure it out when you made me move into that tiny apartment. Just like I had to figure out how to feel like I mattered when you treated me like a servant on Christmas." Rachel started crying. She said, "Mom, please, don't do this. We're sorry. We didn't mean to hurt you." I looked at her and I said, "You didn't mean to hurt me. You let me eat alone in the kitchen on Christmas. You let me serve you like I was nothing. You took my home and you made me feel like I didn't belong. And not once did you stop and think about how I felt. Not once." Emily fell to her knees. She said, "Please, Mom, we'll do better. We'll change. Just don't take the house. Please." I felt my heart breaking, because despite everything, they were still my daughters. But I couldn't back down. I said, "This isn't about the house. This is about respect. This is about seeing me as a person, not just someone who exists to serve you. I'm not asking you to leave because I hate you. I'm asking you to leave because you need to understand what you've lost." Jonathan handed them the papers. He said, "You have 30 days. If you have any questions, contact my office." We left. I didn't look back. I could hear Emily crying. I could hear Rachel calling my name, but I kept walking. I got in the car, and Jonathan drove me away. He said, "That took a lot of courage, Catherine." I said, "It wasn't courage. It was survival." The next few weeks were hard. My daughters called me every day. They sent messages. They begged me to change my mind. Emily said they had nowhere to go. Rachel said I was being cruel, but I didn't change my mind. I knew that if I gave in now, nothing would change. They would go back to treating me the same way. And I deserved better than that. They moved out on time. Emily and David found a rental house. Rachel helped them move. I heard through a mutual friend that they were struggling, that they were angry, that they felt betrayed. But I also heard something else. I heard that they were talking about me differently. They were starting to realize what they had taken for granted. They were starting to understand. 3 months later, I received a letter. It was from Emily. She wrote that she had spent every day thinking about what happened. She wrote that she was ashamed. She said she never realized how much she had hurt me. She said she took me for granted because she thought I would always be there, no matter what. She said she was sorry, truly, deeply sorry, and she asked if we could meet. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop. Emily looked tired. She looked older somehow. She sat across from me, and she cried. She said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I treated you terribly. I was selfish and ungrateful. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try. I want to be better. I want to be the daughter you deserve." I reached across the table and held her hand. I said, "I forgive you. But things have to change. You have to see me, really see me, not as someone who serves you, but as your mother, as a person." She nodded. She promised. And slowly, we started to rebuild. Rachel apologized too. She admitted that she had been too focused on her own life to notice what was happening. We started having dinners together. Real dinners. Where I sat at the table. Where I was included. Where I was valued. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. As for me, I kept the money from the house sale. I used it to travel. I visited places Robert and I always dreamed of seeing. I bought a small cottage by the sea. I lived my life on my terms. And my daughters learned the most important lesson of all, that love without respect means nothing, and that the woman they thought they could treat like a servant was actually the woman who owned everything, including her own dignity.